State education policy is dividing New Mexico politics. While the public education department says it's raising student achievement, many teachers and administrators have problems with the standards and how they're being implemented. The National Education Association New Mexico has filed a lawsuit against the department. The lawsuit contends the state is infringing on local school district authority to have a say in how their teachers are evaluated. It's the latest attempt to reduce the use of student test scores in the evaluation of teachers. Child poverty, special needs kids and a large percentage of English language learners. National Education Association Las Cruces President Patrick Sanchez says these are some of the challenges that define teaching in Las Cruces public schools. But he says the Public Education Department's top-down implementation of a statewide uniform evaluation policy is making it hard to address these local concerns effectively. In particular, he's concerned about the Public Education Department's preoccupation with student test performance to evaluate teachers. Sanchez says the system unfairly penalises teachers and is even driving them out of the profession.
If you are a teacher of English language learners, or if you teach special needs students, guess what's going to happen to those test scores? They're not going to be as high. So how do you attract the best teachers to teach our students that are most in need? It's craziness.
Sanchez says the state is infringing on local school district authority over how teachers are evaluated. We asked the Public Education Secretary-designate Hannah Scandera before the case was filed if the state is indeed overstepping its bounds.
No, I think we're asking the wrong question. The question is, are we making sure our kids are getting the very best education possible? And how do we know that they are? And then we start looking at, well, are we graduating more students? And I talked earlier about we're #1 in the nation today for improvement in our graduation rate. You don't get to be #1 overall until you're #1 in improvement.
NEA New Mexico maintain local authority is being violated, and they've filed a lawsuit against the Public Education Department. The case follows NEA-supported legislation to minimise the weight of student test scores in teacher evaluations, ultimately vetoed by Governor Martinez, and earlier attempts to work collaboratively with the governor.
The governor and the secretary-designate were not interested in hearing any of our input from either administrators, superintendents, or the teachers represented by the National Education Association. It became a farce, it became a rubber stamp. They wouldn't listen to any of our ideas.
Sanchez acknowledges that the lawsuit being filed in Santa Fe District Court is likely to be long and drawn out and may be appealed in the state Supreme Court. He says the coming election and gubernatorial candidate, Gary King, might produce a more immediate solution. King has said his first act as governor would be to remove the current teacher evaluation system, along with Hannah Scandera from the Public Education Department. With student performance on state tests becoming such a big factor in how teachers are evaluated, many students say it is detracting from their education. Not only are they feeling the pressure to perform, but they say their classroom time is being dominated by test preparation. Jacqueline Sanchez, daughter of National Education Association Las Cruces President Patrick Sanchez, is a senior at Mayfield High in Las Cruces. She says all the different tests that they have to do have become a source of despair among her classmates.
I've seen kids cry before they take tests. They take these tests. Pray. It's ridiculous. We look like we're being sent to our deaths before we take these tests. Yeah.
Sanchez says preparing for tests dominates the time in the classroom.
My teachers are always stressed, and they're always teaching to these standards, these big standards that are written up on the wall. And we can never delineate from that. Like, we can never just have a conversation about an interesting thing that came up in the reading.
An anonymous survey produced by the NEA, the National Education Association, found only 7% of Las Cruces public school teachers believed state-mandated assessments improved the quality of student work. In fact, the NEA states student achievement is actually being reduced as tests crowd out time for meaningful learning.
I mean, I took like 13 of these tests last year, which is excessive, I believe. And then they're just making these tests so high stakes, you know? They're telling us we're not going to graduate if we don't pass them.
NEA board member and Mayfield High School academic counsellor Bruce Hartman says he's seen even A and B grade students crack under the pressure and completely bomb on tests. He says testing shouldn't be the only way student performance is being measured.
They just, are not good test takers and don't do well. I mean, and even a lot of students, get accepted in college or accepted in a junior college, but they need to pass these tests to graduate from high school, and they're not going to graduate from high school, but they've been accepted in college.
Deming Public Schools Superintendent Dr. Dan Lear acknowledges the student anxiety and absenteeism associated with standardised testing, but he says in a lot of cases that the pressure is actually coming from the teachers. 50% of their evaluations are based on how well their students perform on standardised tests.
Elementary kids would literally tell their parents, I think my teacher's going to get fired if I don't do well on this test. And you talk about anxiety, okay, so that's huge, all right? I mean, you got a third grader who feels like he's responsible for his teacher's employment.
Lear says there's still room for teachers to make their lessons more than just test preparation, but he acknowledges the state mandate that 50% of teachers' evaluation be based on standardised tests could have been implemented more effectively.
I understand the need for accountability, but it's got to be individualized to the student, to the school, and to the district if it's really going to measure what's really going on.
Lear says New Mexico's standardised testing has been heavily focused on holding teachers accountable. He hopes as the system develops, the focus of testing can shift to improving problem areas and gaps in the curriculum. But students like Sanchez say they feel like an experiment in the testing system. Sanchez is concerned about the long-term effect it will have on her educational development.
So I can't learn what I'm going to need in college, I'm stuck learning stuff that is gonna, make me pass this test.
Students can opt out of testing, but not in the final years of school when passing standardised tests becomes a graduation requirement. Earlier this year, we interviewed Mayfield High School senior Jacqueline Sanchez about state-mandated testing in her Las Cruces school.
It's not to be taken lightly, these tests, and we understand that. So we freak out.
And this is Amber Hernandez, a 6th grader at J. Paul Taylor Academy, a charter school in Las Cruces.
I like testing. I'm weird. I love it.
True, Sanchez and Hernandez are at different stages in their education, but there is a major striking difference in their perceptions of standardised tests. Cynthia Reisner is the principal of the J. Paul Taylor Academy, where Hernandez is attending. When she was co-writing the school's charter, she wanted to sidestep the stress and anxiety attached to state-mandated testing, so they don't teach any test instruction, and purposefully play down the high-stakes nature of tests.
So we just tell them to do their best, and the tests are for us to know where we need to teach them better.
Reisner and her co-founder at J. Paul Taylor Academy started applying for the charter in 2009, but not before Reisner spent 30 years working in public schools, where she says standards and state-mandated testing hurt student engagement.
It was so heartbreaking to see children losing the love of learning, and teachers, some of our most creative teachers, as we tied their hands tighter and tighter.
So while students at regular public schools are taking test instruction and learning to standards handed down by the state, students at JP Taylor Academy are immersed in project-based learning, a hands-on, pliable approach directed by student interests and led by their teachers. Tamara Alexander teaches the 3rd grade.
I've been here 3 years, and I think I'm a recovering testomaniac. I'm getting really close to being a survivor of that system.
Alexander started at J. Paul Taylor Academy after 16 years working in traditional public schools. She says she was completely burned out trying to engage kids frustrated by testing and uninspired by rote learning controlled by state standards.
Come to get to teach at this school is like a golden ticket. I'm teaching the way that kids learn. I'm teaching the way that I taught when I first started. I'm teaching the way that I was taught.
Educators like Alexander may have the freedom to teach the best way they know how, but like any charter school, J. Paul Taylor Academy is still accountable to the state. The school receives an A through F grade, and teachers are evaluated on how well their students perform on tests. So how are they doing compared to other schools in the district? J. Paul Taylor received a B from the state. According to 2013-14 results, the number of students rated proficient and above in reading was more than 14% higher than the district average. In math, 17.8% higher than the district average. Alexander says the scores reflect the more meaningful learning at J. Paul Taylor Academy. Though they don't teach to the test, Alexander says she and her colleagues have to spend hours weaving what the tests are measuring into what their students are interested in learning. Alexander says last school year, the state-mandated concepts came alive in a study of the Middle Ages.
Their castles that they were building wound up being studies in area and perimeter. We looked at volume. We figured out distances between different countries.
Principal Reisner says all the paperwork and pressure from administrators make taking this teaching approach impossible in a traditional public school environment. But with J. Paul Taylor Academy only going up to the 8th grade, Reisner says public schools is where a lot of her students like Hernandez are likely to end up.
I do have concerns because they've learned to lead and love learning, and they'll be going to an environment where I'm afraid sometimes that might not be accepted.
And that's not Reisner's only concern. She says there's a push by some legislators to bring charter schools like J. Paul Taylor Academy more in line with traditional public schools.